I am, well, what you call a throwback. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the family. I believe in good health and organic food. I believe in justice. And I believe in going after the corrupt bullies that are trying to take over our society. Because to quote a posthumous quote of a bygone era from an unknown author, no man escapes when freedom fails. The best men rot in filthy jails. And those that cried, appease, appease, are hanged by those they tried to please. Groveling and licking boots will give you slavery. Putting your head down and going along with the system will not protect you. Up front for a while, it may be okay to be a slug, but over time, it will grow a lot of wolves, and they will get very aggressive. Bev Harris is an American writer, activist, and founder of Black Box Voting, Inc. BlackBoxVoting.org is her amazing website. A national, nonpartisan, nonprofit elections watchdog group. She helped to popularize the term black box voting while authoring a book of the same title. And, of course, her research got made into a film that aired on HBO that was very popular and award-winning. It was also in theaters. She discovered the source code for voting machine manufacturer Diebold Election Systems, which now operates under the name Premier Election Systems. After examining these files, Harris wrote an article in 2003 detailing how to bypass passwords and manipulate election results on the Diebold GEMS central tally system. It's designed for fraud. Harris filed a whistleblower lawsuit against Diebold Election Systems and has made had made false claims when selling their system to Alameda, California. Diebold paid the state of California $2.6 million to settle the case. That's just an example of hundreds of things she's done, literally hundreds, digging in trash cans, proving they didn't count votes, catching them driving off. There are so many different ways to engage in fraud, but it's that comptroller centralized way we've got to look for. And here it is, folks. Our election system is a joke compared to many countries. I don't trust the UN to be here overseeing it. They're just as bad or worse. But here's Forbes, not Bev Harris. Romney family investment ties to voting machine company that could decide the election, causing concern. Really, you think so? And you've got this going on now. Like Senator Hagel, got voted in on machines. He owned almost all the machines in the state of Nebraska. And this just goes on and on and on. Democrats are famous for their retail fraud, voting repeatedly, and some election fraud at centralized systems, mainly locally. Am I wrong, Bev, to say, though, Republicans seem to have it down in big national thieving? Or is that an oversimplification?
Well, it is complex. And I think what we can certainly say is the good old boys from both parties want the system to be open for business. And you know that because it doesn't matter how many times it's proven, they don't solve anything. The same exact systems that we demonstrated were easily hackable in Hacking Democracy, the film that you mentioned, are still in use with no changes. They know it's open for business. You have to figure that was maybe a feature that they want. And I don't know if I would even go so far as to say which party, but I will say, in your lead-in, when you talk about the Romney family having ownership ties to Hardinner Civic, which is now the second biggest voting machine company in the United States, that is unprecedented.
At a national level, I forget the numbers, but wasn't it the election that got Senator Hagel in? Didn't his company that he actually founded and controlled, didn't it count something like 92% of the votes or something? Right.
And at the time, I just got, they were like, how dare you report? How could that possibly be that that's impropriety? Well, now we have a presidential candidate whose family is into ownership of the machines that count his votes. And make no mistake about it, whether they have a paper ballot or not, they are concealing the count from the public. And essentially, whoever controls those machines controls the outcome.
Well, it's amazing, and I guess Romney's argument would be, I'm being sarcastic here, is, hey, the illegals get to vote twice for Obama, so I just get to I mean, it's amazing to see these different crime syndicates fighting over the levers.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because when people say, oh, it's the Republicans doing it, oh, it's the Democrats doing it. No, it's the crooks doing it.
Exactly.
And they come in all colors and stripes.
Incredible. Well, I mean, I know you've got a lot on your radar screen. We'll obviously try to get you on right after the election. What's some of the main chicanery you're tracking right now over at blackboxvoting.org?
Well, you know, one of the things that concerns me very much is, as you know, let me just backtrack a second. You watched election returns on election night, and you see this charade where they say, oh, the polls have just closed in Texas, and the result is, you know, they announce it within 60 seconds. Even with electronic voting, let me tell you, the result, not one vote is counted in 60 seconds. The results, even from electronic voting, don't come out for 20 minutes or so at the soonest. So what they're doing is they're saying our exit polls have told us that we're projecting that this winner, and they just aren't supposed to announce what their exit polls say. Well, they have now, and by the way, all the news media, which pretends that they're competing for the data, you know, it's such a joke. They actually all use one firm called National Election Pool, NEP, and so they're all using exactly the same numbers when they project. Well, now, NEP, which, bear in mind, is being paid by every major network plus the Associated Press, is claiming it doesn't have enough money to do exit polls in 19 states. Now, really?
Wow.
So I'm thinking we should all have our stopwatches out and watch how the networks handle this. You know, the polls have just closed in Oklahoma. There are no exit polls. You know what? You're not going to have any votes counted for about 20 minutes, and you're not going to have all the votes counted until about 10 or 11 p.m.
Sure, but expanding on that.
How are they coming up with this? Who's winning?
Well, sure. Let's go back to Iowa, what we saw in the Republican primaries. And Ron Paul, God bless him, I guess he doesn't want to look like a sore loser, so he would never say anything. But even the New York Times had to admit that he'd really won Maine and really won Iowa. I mean, and then and then Karl Rove goes on and goes, there were some guys got lost in some trucks, and nobody knows where they are. And then that guy's trying to cue that up. Darren McBreen has it. It's where the horses are racing and all that. And yeah, John Bound, you made that little piece because we cut in as a joke with Karl Rove's statement, some Kentucky Derby horses, and magically Karl Rove hasn't moved forward. But even Karl Rove was laughing about this because they were all tallied at the precinct and then phoned in and posted. There were no trucks and ballots. And then it turned out Republicans bragged days before on radio that they were going to cheat Ron Paul. I mean, could that be their downfall, their out-and-out arrogance?
Well, that's always the downfall of an elite that is taking over power, is they always underestimate the common sense and the brilliance of the everyday man.
Well, what was your take on the stuff we saw in the primaries? I mean,
my gosh. Well, yeah, I'll tell you exactly what my take was. And I am nonpartisan. I want to be able to say Obama this and Romney this. But the bottom line is the Romney people, his employees, took over the Iowa caucuses and ran them, same with Nevada. And then we saw chicanery. And what my take was is this in November is going to be brutal because he's not even arm's length. He just, I'm sorry, he just obviously tampered Iowa, Nevada, Maine, and some very squirrely results came out of South Carolina. That came off of the voting machines, actually, where the algorithms just looked like they just didn't make sense. But, if that's the case, and then we find out that ahead of time, in July 2011, his family got involved in ownership of the voting machine company. Let me tell you, there's something different about the way that Hart, which is the company associated with Romney, Hart voting machines, are programmed. In most locations in the United States, they don't program them locally in the county. They don't have their local IT guy do it. They send them directly to the Hart company, and the Hart company sends them back the memory cards and says, here, put this in your voting machine. So if I'm a presidential candidate and I own that company, all I need is a couple of guys, maybe just one, who is a technician in the plant, and he basically is given the memory cards for the strategic counties.
Well, that's right. And then we can also debate all day whether or not there are connections with George Soros and foreign voting companies. But we do know a lot of the companies now that operate here are foreign owned. So, So, I mean, why not have the communist Chinese government run our voting machines? I mean, this is insane what we put up with.
Well, it's not democracy. It's not a democratic republic. It's just the government choosing itself. That's what it is. And once the public starts to understand that, hey, if we can't see the counting itself, the original count, not some after-the-fact, theater, if we can't see and authenticate that, we don't have a system where we have sovereignty. We don't have a system where the public is in control. It's not self-government.
You're right. It's not self-government. Are you thinking we're going to see a pretty big circus this year?
Yeah. There's a lot of things. Colorado, talking about these heart voting machines with Ohio, we're in Cincinnati, and that's going to be a problem. I agree. But Colorado is very dominated by these heart intercivic voting machines, and there are so many strange things that have come out of Colorado. Let me just mention, the Secretary of State has said, let's not put seals on the voting machines this year. It costs too much. Bear in mind, the seals cost a penny, okay? Why are they not sealing things?
Stay there. Insider billionaire investors like George Soros and John Paulson have recently made massive moves into gold, purchasing what Bloomberg News described as gold hoards. Soros alone doubled his holdings in a single day. Russia's Vladimir Putin has doubled down on gold, increasing the country's holdings by over 100%, with $1.8 trillion under management. The bond king, Bill Gross, the world's preeminent bond fund manager at PIMCO, has warned investors of the dangers of QE3 and inflation. And what's he betting on? You guessed it, gold. Friends, this is Alex Jones for MidasResources.com. For more than 15 years, I have exclusively used Midas Resources for all my precious metal needs. Whether it's bullion or collectibles you're looking for, Midas Resources is simply the best. I own my gold as a hedge against inflation. This Federal Reserve fiat currency could go the way of the Deutschmark and the Weimar Republic anytime. In these historically dangerous times, it makes sense to physically hold gold and silver. Midas already has some of the best deals in the industry. But if you give them a call and mention the radio special, they will give you a list of the day's super specials. Midas brokers are standing by to answer all your questions at 800-686-2237. They also have a lot of informative free literature explaining the opportunities and risk of holding precious metals. They are ready to answer your questions at 800-686-2237. Again, that's 800-686-2237. Well, we've got a short segment here with Bev Harris and a big news blitz, and your calls coming up. I'll give the number out in the next segment, but Bev has agreed to come on in the days after the election, which you can really track what's happening and what's unfolding. But blackboxvoting.org is also supported by people who donate, because she's got to do filing, she's got to pay for things. I want to get into what you're expecting in this election and what you were trying to say about Colorado as we went to that hard break. But how do people support the work you're doing?
They go to blackboxvoting.org, and we have a physical address there and also an online donation page. It is really important because coming into this election, it usually costs us about $50,000 to just get the records. And by the way, I started to mention Colorado. They passed a last-minute law that said no one can get any records until 45 days after the election. It's suspicious as heck, let me tell you. But we intend to get them anyway. What we need the records for is for litigation and to prove the case, because we have to get the public to the point. We've done a lot of proving over the last 10 years, but it seems each election cycle we get a whole new wave of people who start to understand and get it and take action themselves.
And let's remember, 10 years ago when you'd come on my show, people are like, Hagel owns the company that 90+% vote for him on in Nebraska? You mean these companies can remote access these? You mean engineers are going public in legislatures and testifying they were hired to engage in fraud?
Right.
And there's been, I mean, it's come out in Ohio there was fraud. I mean, this is really going on. So we've gone from most Americans not knowing it's even happening to, well, I guess it's just fraud.
Well, we are getting to a tipping point. We're getting closer. I can feel it because I was there and you were there back in the day. And back then, we were getting called all kinds of labels. Oh, we were conspiracy theorists and this and that. Well, you know, it's been proven by umpteen universities. There's been, you know, several different cases that have been won in lawsuits now. And it's just a matter of getting this big mammoth, behemoth country that we have to the tipping point so that enough people really do understand it. And secondly, that they do not accept it. Because if we start accepting this stuff, it's all over.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, it's one thing to battle for people to finally wake up and realize this is happening, but then do we just accept it and go, well, I'm still going to go be part of the, you know, the event, even though it's not real. I want to feel like I have power. We need to get in and go back to paper ballots. Briefly, what else are you going to be looking for in this election, A? And then B, what are some of the basic things that need to be done to get our election system back?
Well, we have a video on the very front page, the very top, that gives a simple thing that people can do in most of the country that will help block one attack vector. You mentioned earlier that some of these companies are foreign-owned. One of the huge foreign-owned companies is SOE Software, which is reporting the results, not counting, but reporting the results for 1,400 locations in 26 states. It's massive. So what that means is what comes out of even the voting machine has an opportunity to be changed before it's reported to the public. So that video shows you how you can block that or catch that by simply capturing a photograph of a specific document as the polls close to show, because you don't have to catch it everywhere. You just have to catch it in one or two places, and it's everybody out of the pool. This place is changing results.
And I've seen different breakdowns by universities. The United States has one of the least transparent, rated as one of the worst systems in the world. But Americans don't realize we're now not the laughingstock. People in foreign countries, they know we're a joke.
Oh, yeah. You know, the Carter Center monitors elections in foreign countries, and they announced in 2008 that we don't even qualify for their monitors because we have an election system that is worse than Bosnia-Herzegovina. It's worse than Uganda. It is a joke. And Europe understands this. I mean, there's 3 countries in Europe now that have banned electronic voting. And they're looking at the United States just going, what are you guys doing?
Well, there's a reason we live under so much tyranny, because they know we can't get rid of them by and large. I mean, that's quite a realization that we've been taken over.
Well, and we've been taken over. I should also mention this isn't just the United States. This is a global effort. There's no question about it. The same exact companies, ES&S and, you know, Dominion is the name of one of the ones. They're also taking over the voting in other countries. There's a big citizens movement in India now. There's one in the Philippines. You know
what, Bev? I know I only had you scheduled for 2 segments. Can you do 5 more to break down the constellation of companies and what they're doing globally?
What time are we at right now?
It's 12:30 Central.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, let's come back and finish up with that, because I want to talk about the companies, what's happening worldwide, and then we'll get on to the news.
Everything we said came true. Everything we've done has been right.
Okay, Bev Harris finishing up with us. I'm Alex Jones, if you just tuned in, your host. We're talking about black boxes run by proprietary companies with courts ruling that it's proprietary and no one in government, private citizens can know what's going on with wireless modems hooked up to machines where you've got exit polls not matching, admitted fraud caught over and over again, companies caught going in and manipulating things. I mean, they've been caught. And here we stand. So Bev, in closing, go over some of the companies and what's happening worldwide and the resistance forming to it. I mean, this is how you get rid of the pesky people in their own republics or in their own democracies actually having power. It's very simple. If you can get your machines in and get people to accept it and have your prostitute media be compliant and say, oh, conspiracy theorists say there's fraud, then you and I and the Collier brothers and countless others prove it's a fraud over the last few decades. And they're like, okay, but now there's not fraud. So break down how big this problem is and where you see it going.
Yeah, well, you know, first of all, just understand that if you are a multinational corporation doing resource extraction or different, you know, things like that, you want to be able to put your thumb on the scale of legislation, because the one thing that can impede your profits is some pesky legislature passing laws against things that you want to do. So you want to be able to control which politicians are in there. You don't want to just do it in one country because you're a global multinational corporation. You want your thumb on the scale in multiple countries. So that's one thing. There's about 4 big boys in terms of the voting machine companies. Also understand they're all interrelated in terms of their ownership and the key people, and that in many cases we don't know who owns them because they don't see they have to tell us. But the big ones, there's one called Dominion, which is headquartered out of Canada, which is also associated and licenses its stuff to one called Smartmatic, which is out of Venezuela. And then there's ES&S, which is huge globally. It's all over the world. And there is Hart InterCivic, which is the one that's associated with Romney. And there's Seidel, which is one that's owned by a Barcelona, Spain company. Now, these different companies, and they are interrelated guys in many cases, are really pushing exactly the same concept into many, many countries at once. And the citizens in many countries are starting to figure it out. It's not just here. I'm in contact very often with guys in India, because in India, the government literally built its own voting machines and chooses itself. And they're very aware of that there. In the Philippines, they have this company. It's a joke. It's out of Venezuela, and it licenses stuff from this Dominion company, which also runs the New York voting. And, it's crazy. One election, they had results show up which are out of Colombia in the Philippines. And they're saying, don't worry, trust us, it's okay. So this is, it's a secret, concealed voting system push, and get it into all these different countries and just tell people, don't worry, it's a computer, it's okay. Obviously, whoever controls the computer controls the outcome.
Well, you've used the analogy of bank cards and bank security. I mean, imagine if banking security was like this, nothing would be secure. I mean, it's this one area that they're just like, trust us, and then there's all the fraud, all the anomalies, all the payouts, all the scams, all the things that have come out hundreds of times, and they still just smile at us and say, just trust us. And then Karl Rove goes on Fox News and makes jokes about Iowa and just make stuff up, and then it turns out there was fraud, and then they have Republican operatives on shows bragging, saying, yeah, Ron Paul's not going to win. Wait and see what happens next week. And then that happens. I mean, it's just amazing.
Well, it is in your face now, and one of the things that I think is the next step is to try to get people accustomed to it so that we accept it. And so, the open link in the circle of control is they have to have an illusion that elections are real. And they have to have acceptance of the election system. That's the open link. That we cannot allow to close up by either saying we accept it, we don't need to know what's going on. If it takes 75 years to fix this thing, we can't quit, because this is all the marbles. It literally is all the marbles for self-governance versus tyranny.
No, you're right. Here in Austin, the polls I saw were over 80% were against this hospital district that makes us pay for abortions, but not just that. They want us to pay for a new private medical school. And the former Austin mayor, Kirk Watson, who's a state senator, famous for land grabs and things under environmental fronts, he's saying, oh, we really need this. And then it turns out even the proposition a court has ruled is illegal. But the propositions never fail because Austin's famous for fraud. Hart InterCivics, by the way, is based here, for those that don't know, that Romney.
Right.
And so now people know you've got to beat the proposition in court. You've got to beat it and never even let it get to the ballot, because they don't ever vote anything down here. I mean, if they get it on the ballot to roast your newborn children every Halloween, it would pass. It's just amazing to be.
That's the thing. And why, when you start looking at private equity companies owning the voting machines, private equity companies are the same companies that own, hospital chains and so forth. It's clearly not public self-government. And so we have to keep our eyes on the ball and go, look, We insist on the right to see and authenticate every essential step of our elections without need for special expertise, and you can't substitute some after-the-fact procedure for being able to authenticate the original. That's what they got across in Germany using the Supreme Court. That's been emulated in Ireland. That's what we need to keep focusing on here. It's our ability to authenticate our own elections.
And by the way, they act like we're too big a country to do this. Folks, all they do in the system that works, correct me if I'm wrong, in closing, with Bev Harris, is all you do is you have the little micro precinct.
Right.
And they count the paper ballot, then that's publicly posted on the wall. Everyone could see it. And then you have the precinct added all up. That's posted. Then you add all the precincts up, and it's actually very good. It works, and it's super hard to engage in any type of fraud with that.
Right. It's the concept of dispersed control. What we're doing with voting machines is centralized control. That's not what this country was founded on. It was founded on the premise of the dispersal of power.
Yeah, people argue all day about, what type of system of government we want. We need a republic where it's dispersal of power and where the people, have the right to make the decisions and where we're on top. And they have these preachers at 501c3 churches teaching under government order, basically, to teach Romans 13 out of context, submit to Caesar, do what Caesar says. Well, we are Caesar. We are the boss.
Right. I mean, once we get it under, it's like we have this inferiority complex which is being drummed into us. And the fact is, we created this country, we made this country what it is, using those dispersed power systems. And so we need to keep that up.
Well, people need to go donate at blackboxvoting.org. Our listeners are incredible, and they've donated to us over the years with once-a-year fund drive we've done for 5 years to help build the TV studio and do so many other things and now get satellite uplinks. I want to thank listeners for the money bomb last week, the 48-hour transmission. It's important to support our AM and FM affiliates, to call them and thank them. A lot of new stations picking us up, to sponsor them if you're a local business. It's called Voting with Your Dollars, to support sponsors you hear on those stations. Because, you buy nothing but Chinese slave goods, you end up deindustrializing your country. You end up supporting local businesses, you end up having a community. And I can't think of anybody better to support than Bev Harris, who's totally nonpartisan, who's had all these lawsuits, who's won, who's exposed things, who's got, Hacking Democracy on HBO, who really, more than anybody, helped break through. There's been a lot of other great investigators, but she, with her dogged, former corporate fraud investigator, who started looking into this. In closing, Bev, people can donate at blackboxvoting.org. So important. We can't wait to have you on to break down, what transpires. Hopefully it won't be too bad this year after the election. But in closing, what woke you up to this?
Just the secrecy, the fact that we didn't know who owned the companies. We couldn't watch anything. We couldn't get any way to authenticate it. Having been in corporate fraud and done reporting on that, when you start having things go behind closed doors, you start having fraud. It's human nature. We're not going to change human nature just because we had an electronic computerized machine. There's going to be people who want to exploit it. They're going to do it. They've done it. And we need to get the public up to speed on what's really going on.
Yeah, I've talked to executives and people, and I've looked up the numbers on this, but concur, if this is what you found, around half the people in corporate America, they estimate, are stealing. And, of course, a lot of them get caught. It's a recklessness, and I've never cheated or stolen like 6 packs of beer out of golfers' golf carts when I was a teenager, and I didn't think of that as stealing, but it was. But I've never been like a thief. I don't have a criminal mind. I have kind of a straightforward mind. But you know what? That criminal mind is out there. And now that corruption has just been accepted, it's obviously getting worse. I mean, take Lance Armstrong. I ranted about it yesterday, saying, the system itself was engaged in fraud too and allowed him to cheat because he was such a big name. That's coming out. And people are like, so what, Alex? Everybody takes drugs. I smoke pot. Don't bash people that use drugs. We're not bashing people that use pot. We're saying cheating in sports, being an icon for kids. I mean, we've gotten so corrupt now that people are like, oh, let Armstrong cheat. Don't put down Austin. I mean, it's just so weird.
Yeah, well, and we have to keep holding the fort against that stuff, because once we accept corruption, what are we doing? We're just becoming slaves and handing over our freedom to some guy who wants to make a lot of money while we, look who has to follow the laws now, only the little guy.
Exactly. And Mexico, North Korea, once corruption sets in and you accept it, it's over. I mean, I'll go back to this quote here, and I want your take on them. We'll let you go. No man escapes when freedom fails. The best men rot in filthy jails, and those that cry to appease are hanged by those they tried to please. Folks, you're not going to get ahead licking boots and groveling. That's the creed of slaves. Who are slaves? People that don't stand and fight. Bev Harris.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a brilliant quote. Absolutely true. And I thank you, Alex, for continuing to remind people of the truth. The truth does have a way of bubbling up, and you've been a brilliant vessel in that regard.
Well, God bless you, and we'll talk to you right after the election. Thank you, Bev Harris.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow, there she goes. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the sites, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.